Welcome to the Corporate Venturing series, a special today from Monterey, the Global Corporate Venturing event, which is where I learned so much. But today we have a very special guest, Claudia, who is advising NEA, but has a wealth of knowledge about corporate venturing. Welcome, Claudia.
Thank you, Nicolas. Great to be here.
Thank you. Claudia, do you mind maybe 5-10 minutes telling your story into corporate venturing?
Sure.
It's a really special one.
Yes, like you said, Nicolas, there's so many different journeys that led to corporate venture. Mine is actually one of a 30-year career with a very large corporation who gave a foreign student with a scholarship a little summer internship to pay the bill. I joined IBM while I was in the summer getting my master in computer science, and then joined the company R&D to work on magnetic disk drive. Somewhere along that journey, I was rising through more of a business leadership, particularly in the commercialization and licensing of research technologies and these $1.2 billion a year revenue in the licensing of R&D portfolio. And along came a brave new CEO, Lou Gerstner, into IBM. And this was obviously year 2000. And he said to me, since you're the executive that knows about our own internal R&D portfolio,
Yep.
the venture, remember, Nicolas, year 2000, venture hit $100 billion annual investment.
VCs, financial VCs.
Financial
Yeah,
VC.
yeah.
So, and corporate VC was almost non-existent,
Exactly.
right? So Lou Gerstner said, well, there's got to be something there that should matter to us, because this massive level of startup trying to revamp everything that we ever see in the world. And why don't we start a mission to really go out there and be able to spot what is relevant? What are the startups that are developing things that will be relevant to us today or maybe somewhere down the road? And I remember thinking, I got 3,000 of the best PhDs in the world in my lab. MIT, Caltech, you name it. These are the people we hire into our R&Ds. Just tell me what you want. I'll have them make it for you. And of course, somebody had to remind me that he's a CEO, so I don't get to say no to him. So this is my journey into corporate venture. No clue what that really means. No clue how relevant that really will be to IBM. But the timing was very critical. If you recall, obviously the bubble burst and the internet has this whole, downturn. But the logic of innovation, disruption has not gone away. Along came, the wireless, the cloud. All these innovative technological innovation really fill the corporate venture world. And one of the things that I've done is understanding where is IBM's strategy in terms of looking at the future. At the same time, providing insight I can see from the venture community, what we call the headlights, and trying to fine-tune that strategy and to make sure that we are in sync with what this $100 billion a year investment community is doing. Well, the funny part about that is we were not really focusing on investing. I mean, remember, I'm a computer science engineer. Mm-hmm. Year 2000, we are right on the scene, and people are looking at us and saying, if you're not investing, you don't get to have a seat on the table.
Yep.
I'm not going to show you where I'm investing or what my company, right? You have absolutely no vested interest and no share risk with us.
Yep.
So I have to go back to the large, mothership of mine and say, look, we don't get a seat on the table because we're really not putting any risk on our own shoulder. All we want to do is do the sniffing of what other people are investing, and that is not okay in this community, as you know, right? I mean, a lot of CVC has to learn that trick, that you can't just consuming the management attention, the bandwidth for your own interest without really contributing value and share the risk in helping to grow these company. And lucky for me, IBM was a very large balance sheet, very, very cash, rich company. So we actually became a fund of fund. We're in 87 venture funds around the world. Yes.
So you invested in more funds than most CVC invest in
Well,
startups.
you know why? Because I am not an investor. For me, the experience that I have, as I was telling you, is I know IBM. I know where IBM is going. Particularly, I know where IBM R&D is going because I have to manage that portfolio. But I have no idea how to build a company. I've been inside IBM Lab for the first 15 years of my career with IBM.
Yes.
So clearly my model, or the IBM model, they did not put a professional investment team in place. What they did is put a professional team that knew how to develop products and how IBM can take these products to the marketplace, and then use that skill to try to bring innovative component from the venture community and be able to incorporate or integrate that into the mainstream product development cycle of IBM. And that's very different, right? Yep. With the exception that if you don't know how to do direct investment, then you have to trust people who know how to. So we invested in all these funds because these are professional financial investors. And along the way, as you know, we started making some direct investment alongside.
As you learn about
as we learn, as they actually taught us. But we were never the people who led the round. We were never people that sat on the board, not even as an observer. We always let the people who know how to build a company. Our only job is really understand where the strategic alignment is between that investment and our own parent company. And two, really do our due diligence on the credibility of the investors behind them. I don't even know how to do the due diligence on the CEO, which is what the VC do, right? The founding team, the CEO. Instead, I did the due diligence of whose money they are attracting into their funding, and that gave me the due diligence I needed to de-risk the level of investment they are putting into those private companies. So even though we were direct investors, we were never doing the same type of due diligence as the financial investors did.
Very interesting. So one thing I like the idea, the analogy of sniffing around, which would be really the worst practice you could do as a corporate VC.
Yeah, and it's bad for all of us, right?
All of us, for the full ecosystem.
Exactly.
But what I like is your profile was perfect to identify the gaps inside the organization.
Yes.
But also, IBM was a system integrator. So you're not necessarily interested by what could disrupt IBM as much as what could disrupt the customers.
Yeah.
Can you talk about how, when you set up the corporate VC, you started to add value to IBM's own customers?
Yes. For us and the innovation, for the first 15 years, innovation meant what is in the R&D lab, right? Meaning inventions, really. And what I learned as I went into the corporate venture, as I learned from my CEO, is innovation comes from a whole spectrum of players. It comes from university, come from your own customer, your supplier, your employee is a great source of innovation. But what I really learned was it is such a challenge to get this tiny little company with a little component of the technology into this just a gorilla of a company as IBM was, with incredible stack of products and solutions and business units. And you have to sort of navigate and, try every door to see if you're knocking on the right door, with the exception that if you can convince a customer that this is something that he or she needs for their business success, large, IBM at that point was, when we started the venture, we had 440,000 employees around the world. That is,
It's a gorilla.
It's a gorilla. 173 countries, and it just is. Everything is matrix about fifth dimension. So you can go into a black hole, or you can have a paying customer saying, IBM, you're my integrator. You're running my data center. You're providing all the business application for my critical business processes. And I'm seeing this new thing that can help me accelerate, optimize, cost reduction, or have a bleeding edge of something that my competitor don't have. Once the customers say that, if you can go, that is a shortcut to any conversation you need to have internally, even in the gigantic machine like IBM was.
That's a golden nugget.
Yes.
Now, you talk about gorilla, but I think you have even better analogy.
Yes.
Do you mind explaining the elephant?
Yes. So my CEO, Lou Gerstner, actually did write this book called Who Says Elephants Can't Dance, because he came into IBM when we were struggling like the AT&T. People were saying, IBM is going to split up into a little baby bell, just like AT&T, which was a world-class industrial lab at that time. And the second to AT&T was IBM, so we're like next in the chopping block for internal R&D. So they brought Lou Gerstner in, obviously, head of McKinsey and all that. He transformed the company. He absolutely transformed the company.
Nothing like a crisis.
Yes. And this fresh voice, this incredible fresh voice that has no legacy, doesn't know where all the bodies are buried and all the wounds, and just looking everything from fresh point of view. So Lou Gerstner came in and transformed the company, and then everybody doubted him. Like, oh, come on, IBM is so big, there's no way you can get them out of the mainframe business, and blah, blah, blah. So when he succeeded in taking the stocks that was trading at $41 to stock trading at $210 after the split, twice.
After the split.
So he's, in essence, it was trading at 800, but he split it twice. He wrote this book called Who Says the Elephant Can't Dance. As we started the corporate venture, we have to do a lot of internal convincing. After he left, a new CEO, which really became my main sponsor. Lou was only there for a year after he set up the team. He's the one who set up the team. And then Sam Palmisano came in as a CEO, and he really was my sponsor.
I see.
So during that time, I still have to go, like you do, to all the senior executives inside the company and explain what we're doing, how we're doing it. So I developed this chart, and because of Lou Gerstner's Who Says Elephant Can't Dance, it was a businessman wearing his suit, and what he doesn't know is behind him an elephant is charging towards him with full speed, and in front of him an arm is hanging him a little mice. so he can actually diffuse the situation that he's in. So we were this tiny little mice, small as it is, that can actually give the solution to the need of this large corporation of IBM, which is this huge elephant that is charging forward with all the mainframe revenue and all this. It really became, just because you're small doesn't mean you're irrelevant, right? Yep. Just because the relative David and Goliath type of things that everybody understand, it doesn't give you the relevancy message that whatever a little startup mean to our customers and to the marketplace that we serve. And that chart actually was my cover chart for almost every internal deck that I use to really convince the executives that we need to be paying attention to these little small solutions that are being developed by the venture community. And it was a very, because everybody knew the book that our CEO wrote, it was a very convincing.
No one could challenge it.
Because if you don't know, the power of elephant, you haven't read the book. And no, it was an incredible journey in the sense of I really didn't get it at first. When Lou Gerstner first proposed to set up this group, I thought, why? We got such incredible R&D. We're getting over $1 billion in licensing fee. Remember, that's like free money. Right? We're already investing anyway.
100% margin.
Exactly. It's all sunk cost. There's really no additional SG&A contribution from that. The idea is that we need to find somebody else's technology to help us as a corporation was ludicrous to me.
So you were skeptic to start?
Very much. As a matter of fact, I felt I was betraying, my R&D, which is where I grew up in IBM. For the first 15 years, I was part of the R&D at IBM. I entered R&D as a summer student.
You really felt like betraying?
Very much, because one of the hardest things for a scientist, and remember IBM has like 7, 8 Nobel Prize physicists, and we're very proud of who we are as a R&D center, is, if you're the best, right? Your technology, your project is going to change the world. And the fact that you have to go outside to look for what might be so important to this large corporation that pays your bill was kind of offensive to the scientists, because that means they're not doing their job, because they're literally paid to take care of the future technological needs that the company has and our customer has. But along came, social, mobile, cloud analytic, everything is shifting under our feet. And it was very clear that the innovation, not just in terms of the project, but the model itself was no longer serving the needs of large corporations. And I still think it's true, because things are just changing at the speeds that none of us can grasp. I mean, I grew up in R&D. 802.11, the little Wi-Fi that we all have, took 10 years from when the technology was feasible, available, to when it become commercializable. It comes from a 10-year of standard definition, 802.11a, then B and G. Before you and I can just log on to anything, that technology took 10 years to become deployable at the mass level. Who's got 10 years today for any technology? They're just,
There's
with
an impatience.
You just can't compete, right? If you're going to take that kind of approach to any kind of technological innovation, chances are you won't survive. As a matter of fact, history show most of the corporations that was there 50 years ago are not longer here because they stopped innovating.
I'm going to ask a question I've never asked on this series, because the audience is really for people thinking about going into corporate venturing.
Yeah.
But here you have such a perspective that I think we should talk to the CEO of a company who's thinking about starting a CVC. Yes. And in a way, coming from R&D, I feel like you had this unique advantage of understanding R&D. And even though you felt like betraying them, you actually could see how you could help them as well. So to the CEO of companies who are thinking about setting a corporate VC, what would be your recommendation to set it right? And how to pick that person, whether from the inside or from the outside?
I think they can both work. Is really much more about the person, the model he or she defined for the team, than the fact that they have or have not. My experience in my time when we started in 2000, because it was so new, it was so poorly understood, it was seen as, most of my colleagues would say to me, what did you do wrong? Why are they putting you to the sideline? You're doing so well at the corporate level. Yep. But I think that has changed. I think CEOs, by and large, understand why innovation is such a critical part of their job, to be able to identify the next generation of everything and the next iteration of whatever they're doing today. That kind of notion that the internal person, like I was, certainly was a lot more effective in navigating internally. Because I knew, the head of every large business. I grew up with them, chances are. And IBM is a very technology-driven company. So most of the senior leadership all come from the R&D lab, and all have some advanced degree, engineering or science. So my role clearly was, at that point, a very complex and very, I will say, resistant audience inside a large corporation, even though I had a very strong CEO sponsorship. Yep. So he will have to come down and say to all the business line managers when they're asking for funding for development or M&A, he will have to say, yeah, but have you talked to Claudia?
That's a sign.
Does she say anything? Has she seen anything that we can get this done cheaper or faster? We don't want to be reinventing wheel, right? Mm-hmm. And most of the people inside large corporation are not aware, like you and I are, about all the deals that are being done in the venture ecosystem, large and small. So that kind of sponsorship for an internal person became very important. But I think if you don't have if you have already an organization who is adopting this innovation model, then somebody who have this fresh look about what we're doing and how you can add value to it and how you can change the processes and model to accelerate the innovation cycle inside the large corporation is very important. So the one thing that I always tell the CEO, and I met with CEO of Fortune 50 about this subject all the time, is this person needs to be like a kid in the candy store. And that is literally that is literally what I said to all the CEO, Coca-Cola, the major bank. Because if you don't have that kind of conviction, that kind of excitement out here, you can just get lost. And then you have to take that and trying to align with a much older, much larger, much more complex entity. And that can be so frustrating if you don't have the fuel of the convictions that you have that this can truly add value and make the impact inside this very large machine that he or she represents. So if you have someone like that who you trust, your management will trust, and that has that kind of a conviction about the mission that he or she is executing for you, then it's not going to be as successful, because the same person who has to convince everybody inside the corporation have to do the same thing externally. Has to convince the CEO of startup, have to convince the venture financial investors that syndicate with, have to convince the corporate venture colleagues.
It's a tall order.
So, I don't recommend a salesman for that, but in essence, that's a lot of what a corporate venture leader do. People fail to understand. They see us out there with the hottest company, with these really reputable. They don't realize how much grinding it takes to just map out, all the moves and making sure all the dots are connecting and the people are working on the right thing. And I think if you don't have someone who can earn that level of trust all across the board, I never saw myself as a relationship person. I'm an engineer. You don't pick engineering if you think you're good at, relationship or something. But what I found is, because I'm so excited about what they're doing.
You want to spread the word.
Yes, and that creates a relationship, right? People are really, really, sharing the excitement that you have about whatever you're doing. They're much more likely to give you the trust level you need to create that relationship. So a successful corporate venture leader create that level of trusted relationship, I will say, across the board. And it's not easy. It's internal, it's external, it's with your employees. You know, in my cases, I work with so many large IBM clients because back then the model was so new. A lot of clients heard about that and want to know what is this about and want to know if IBM can deliver that to them as well. I flew, Nicolas, to Nairobi, Kenya for a 2-hour meeting because the customer want to understand how we, IBM, this big elephant, can help him find the most innovative entrepreneurial product that are being developed in the country because there is a huge economic development agenda to try to promote the entrepreneurship within that particular country. So I became the person who can speak credibly about that to major clients, including large, governments.
It's amazing. So many questions, but let me double click on the last one, which is you flew all the way to Kenya, meeting a customer, expecting you to find the entrepreneurs locally. Is that not difficult when you actually have to fly versus you have a local team? And
I did have a local team, but that was the onset of that. We did put a team in place, but the Minister of Economic Development needed to understand that we know how to play this. That we had a playbook that can help that country achieve. Remember back in those days, every country wants to, how does China get all that money, right? Everybody's sitting back and say, what am I, the chopped liver? Brazil, I went to Brazil and they had this entire book by this top university professor studying the Israeli model. How did Israel get the tiny little Israel, how did they get so successful in entrepreneurship and innovation, right? How does China get on track? So in many ways, people want to understand because the entrepreneurship, not just from the company perspective, became an important part of the growth strategy of large corporation, partnership, acquisition, and all. But for economic development, look at U.S., right? Our economic success is primarily because of the entrepreneurship success that we had here. Look at the Apple, look at the Google, look at the Facebook, right? Look at the Amazon, look at everybody, really. So by and large, I think people do appreciate a lot more what a CVC represents because of all these incredible impacts that we have seen.
So all these insights from the inside, as well as working with many other CVCs. Now you're an advisor to a financial VC, one of the best in the world.
Yes, they really are good.
NEA. What do you bring to NEA? Clearly, I know they ask you to join, but what do you bring to them that's so special?
Is what you and I know in our sleep, really, is how do these incredible, NEA is an incredible firm. Their success is really, and I know every single firm say, oh, we're entrepreneur friendly, right? You can't find one that doesn't say that. But NEA go out of their way to really ensure the entrepreneur are successful at what they're doing. Not just that I get the right return, but they want the entrepreneur to succeed. And that legacy actually came from the founders of the firm that really has this tagline, we want to build a 100-year-old venture capital firm. Yeah. Back in those days, like, are you kidding? Why would you care, right? Cash out and leave. So that cultural component of NEA really rely on how can we help the portfolio company. Yes. And they look at me and they will look at you the same way is, how can you leverage all the resources available to you
for the entrepreneurs?
For the entrepreneur, including this incredible strategic partnerships that you can have with the corporate venture. Not to mention, we're now 50% of all the funding and 30+% of all the deal has a corporate investor in it. So clearly we have grown, but NEA really wants to know from me, and the CEO bring me in when they're talking to a corporate investor, they're talking to a corporate partner, they're in some kind of a strategic partnership discussion. Remember, I've been on the other side of that fence for all my career. I mean, when they're going through an M&A deal. So I know the playbook on the other side, so I help advise the CEO. But I don't really come in, like I told you earlier, I don't really feel I'm the person who can help build a company. I'm not going to be the one out there hunting a CFO for a portfolio. But NEA is so good at it. They have an incredible network of CFOs that they can plug in and out. Yep. They have incredible talent partners that know how to find these incredible board members. So I think it's a very complementary in many ways for corporate venture to have that partnership with the financial venture, because the company building is, you might have, but a lot of corporation itself does not have that, skill. Yeah. Entrepreneurs do, right? People that come from the entrepreneurial community does. They may not have been successful, but boy, you can learn a lot better when you're in the failure situation. So I think that symbiotic relationship between the financial venture and the corporate venture will only grow stronger.
First, I love it, and I fully agree. I think if the angle is to serve the entrepreneurs, make them more successful, which is not the same as pleasing them.
Yeah.
It could be tough love.
Yes.
It could be about how do we help you succeed.
Yes.
And you're going from the right place.
Right.
There's so many synergies.
Yes.
Can you talk about how sometimes you have to coach CVCs to have the right mindset? Yeah. And why are some CVCs thinking about them first? It's maybe human behavior or maybe something else.
Yeah. Oh my God, I hear all the complaint because I'm such an old timer in the industry. I even warn my students that are primarily entrepreneur to watch out with which CVC they're talking about at the Stanford Business School. This thing we're talking about the sniffing test, right? Yes. So I always tell people, I said there's two kind of the tourism in Silicon Valley. There is the safari version, where these people just come in and they want to see all these startups. They're looking at them, reading at them. That's fine.
And then they go.
Right? They don't do anything. But the worst kind is what I call the petting zoo tourism. Oh. Because they're coming in and they're stroking you, they're touching you, they're hugging you, they're giving you all kind of falsehood about this is just about entertainment of their own interest. So they're consuming all your resources, the time, the management, attention.
False hopes.
Yes. And that actually is a lot more dangerous. I warn the entrepreneur a lot more about the petting zoo version of tourism than about the safari version. A safari, at least, they're staying at a distance.
In and out.
They're not consuming a lot from you, right? They just want to know what you're doing, how you're doing. The petting zoo version, they're spending their time stroking you. But then they leave, right? And you're left with very often false assumption of any potential opportunities that, startup love to be able to hop on the back of a...
And entrepreneurs are optimists.
Yes.
So they are going to take this positive signal.
Exactly. And so you're stroking them, you're telling them all these wonderful things, and there's nothing real behind that. That is the worst thing you and I face.
So that's a golden nugget. I never heard this analogy, but I'm loving it.
I really am very, very, there's amazing power and value that CVC deliver to entrepreneur and to financial, just to the ecosystem as a whole. But these are the dangers of entrepreneur, which you and I both know does not have that much resource to consume and that much management attention to devote to anything that does not have a real opportunity behind them.
It has to have a path to a real opportunity.
Right. So how do you recognize that there is something real?
Test.
Right. Yes. So who is this person you talk to? What is his or her reputation? right? I mean, this community is really small when it comes to references, right? You can always figure out what kind of deal this person done, what kind of how he or she, the corporate venture, dealt with the existing entrepreneurs that they are invested in.
Do they follow? Do they
exactly. How are they as a board member? Are they, always have to check back with the mothership before they vote? Right? I mean, do they vote in the interest of you as a company, or do they vote in the interest of their parent company? Yeah. So there's a lot of things like that. So I am very, very, as an advocate for corporate venture, I think all of us leaders should take a very strong position, because in preserving the type of synergy and value we contribute, and also the value we drew from the community. So people always hear, a lot of people heard this safari and petting zoo analogy from me.
I didn't.
Because it's a really a warning. Everybody know about Silicon Valley tourism, right? Yep. But tourism is really, for me, the less damaging side of having corporation coming to the Silicon Valley and misleading a lot of entrepreneurs about what they're able or willing to do with them. And people like us who want to preserve these relationships for the long term are very, very, concerned about the company XYZ. I mean, right? 7-Eleven have who was the last one that I read? I thought, holy, they have a corporate venture arm. I forgot. I mean, 7-Eleven used to be the worst example, but I read somewhere else, I thought, no, it was like, I don't.
It's good you don't remember.
Yeah, it's a good thing I don't mention the name, but I just remember when I read it, I thought, that industry hasn't even innovated for decades.
Now, maybe it's very fitting because we're at GCV, which is such a great initiative, and we meet in Monterey all the corporate VCs that care about building and raising the bar.
Yes.
But it also means, in a way, tough love, which is we need to tell corporate VCs what are the best practices.
Right.
But also to watch out for the ones that don't.
Very much.
Because entrepreneurs may not differentiate between a good CVC and a bad CVC.
Exactly.
But the bad CVC is going to give us a bad reputation.
Yes.
And with Jim Mawson and Claudia, I wrote an article. I don't know if you saw it, but the number is just amazing. Since April 2020, which is basically when COVID became really significant for us.
Yeah.
51% of all investments that involved a corporate VC, 51% were from corporate VC born during the pandemic.
Wow.
Talk about half of the corporate VCs are 2 years old or less.
It's crazy.
How many of them don't know the best practices?
Yes.
So what would you tell to these 2,000 new CVCs born during the pandemic, born during a crisis?
Yeah.
What would you tell them?
I would tell them to think about what the word sustainability means, right? I mean, this is not... Corporate VC goes back to the 1960s, right? The General Motors and the General Electric of the world. Yeah, they all already have, when the balance sheet looks good, they all start looking for alternative investment, vehicles. What is sustainable? I mean, the world know the cyclicality of corporate venture tracing all the way back in those days. But when the balance sheet tightened, which we're all seeing it right now, right? The world is
about now.
Yes. So, how relevant are you, right? If you're not relevant, then the cost saving is going to kick in, and a lot of cost center is going to really, so unless you produce your own evergreen capital to fund your investment, you better have a very strong value proposition going back into your large corporation, as well as the venture community is going to tighten. The days where people are just, walking around thinking, we got money, we got time, we don't really need to be that focused, is gone. And
it will always be. It's always cycles. Anyway.
Yeah, but we just gone through a crazy cycle, right? I mean, I'll tell you, 2020, 21, and 21 at $330 billion a year. I mean, we thought 100 billion was crazy in year 2000, right? It was 330 last year. So there really
free
isn't
money.
free money.
Yeah.
There really isn't that much of a market
Or
to
discipline.
support. Yes. You know, look at fintech. I mean, I sit on the board of a very large bank, right? And I can tell you, I look at fintech portfolio, and I can tell you, we got something cooking almost across the board internally. So, how much of a return can it generate as a standalone company or through the traditional M&A channel when you have, you know, last I checked was 1,061 payment company alone from CBE inside.
Well, subsidized by venture capital.
Yes.
Yeah.
So tell me there's 1,061 different methodologies for payment you and I need,
I
right?
need one. But that works really
Even
well.
PayPal is struggling right now,
yeah,
right?
yeah.
So I, you know, I mean, our heart will always go out to the entrepreneur because that is actually the hardest part being in this business, whether financial or corporate.
Yeah.
Is, you know, the same qualities that make you a good corporate investor is the quality you look at for in an entrepreneur, that they got that conviction, they got that passion for the
In
business.
many ways, a CVC is a startup.
Right, right. So, you know, these are people doing it for the right reason. Rather, the dumb money is the one that they were able to get or not is not necessarily a reflection of the entrepreneur themselves. So when you are seeing the level of, you know, hopefully very quickly trim that is, I mean, I think it's going to be very sad because they devoted, you know, 7 years of their life in some cases building these new technology. I think that's hard. I think if you don't think that's hard, then you shouldn't be in corporate venture because you really don't care about the entrepreneur, right? And if you're just in it for because this is a really exciting job, you get to see all these new things and all that, you are not likely to be successful because people can see through you, whether you're being real or this is just a front that you put. I truly believe that. As a matter of fact, Nicolas, I think I was successful because I was so determined that as soon as my CEO leave, I was going to follow him back into my R&D lab. I was such a not believer of the mission I was giving to execute. I just thought, as you know, I'll do this for 2 years, and I think in a couple of years he's probably done with.
You did it for how long?
15 years.
Exactly.
Yes, I literally was thinking, how long is it gonna take for me to be able to get out of here without hurting the careers that I already have going?
So we talked about NEA, and I met with Forrest.
Yes.
An amazing investor.
Yes.
But one question I ask him is, how much of your time do you spend on new investment versus portfolio company?
Yeah.
Majority is the current entrepreneurs. That says a lot.
Yes.
And you really feel like it's a good sniffing test for any VC or CVC that have enough of a portfolio company is how much do they spend helping the existing entrepreneurs versus finding the new ones? You
know, they really do an amazing job because everybody wants a superstar, right? Everybody wants Forrest and Scott on the board. NEA really look at the company for such a long term. So if you a Forrest company, Forrest may not be on your board because you're at the cycle of your company that Forrest is not the right person.
It has to be the right person.
Right, but the Forrest is still there, engaged, available, and that really is the difference. It's not a very transactional kind of relationship where they invest, get on the board, get off the board. They don't have any commitment. Very much. The commitment is there. Very, very often after the company go public, that commitment is still there. I mean, we carry a very, very large set of public companies on our books as well. I think that really is a different philosophy. There is a lot of venture firm, as you know, including corporate venture firm, that just don't have that level of, you know, commitment to what they're doing and the people they're doing with. And you need to be able to sort them out and make sure you don't transact much of the deal with them.
That's very true. Now, NEA is one of these amazing firms. What it is that one thing you've learned from them that you wish you would have used in your corporate VC? Or if you were to start a new corporate VC, that one learning that you would for sure deploy?
You know, one thing I learned is actually a very big lesson that I think all corporations should learn is the youth. You know, I think we overvalue experience and undervalue the instinct and the fast learning of some of these the talent that we have in the pipeline.
With less filters.
Yes. I mean, you know, in large corporation, you know, you have to pay your dues, right?
It's back to what we discussed earlier, which is corporations are driven by distribution law type of outcomes, which rewards experience.
Right.
But here in venture capital, it's power law.
Right.
Which means that actually it's not consensus you want, it's contrarian view.
Exactly. Where the financial venture like NEA, the talent that NEA had, everybody knows Scott Sandell, Forrest Basket, you know, Pete Soncini of the world. The power underneath the firm, the true pipeline, the talent below that name recognition, household name, it is incredible. It makes me so guilty because I've been an executive for 30 years, and the young people coming to the group, they have to pay their due before they get my attention, right? Because we're, just like you said, we're experience driven. You have to get your seniority to get to the real senior people. You have to be like 1 level, 2 level below. Whereas NEA really bringing these talent and recognizing the talent, trying to teach them and actually start to allow them to be the decision makers very quickly.
That's important.
That doesn't happen in corporation, right?
Cheeky. So we have a lot of beautiful growing trees behind the forest.
Yes.
Very nice.
I really, that actually, I said that a lot, Nicolas. It's not just with this question, but I really tried to think back in my 30-year career and trying to think about the talents that I miss, even though I have them in my organization. The type of development that was lacking inside corporation to really nurture these young talents so they can perform at that level that I see at NEA and other financial venture firm as well, really is regretful to me because, you know, it's your loss, right? So let they go somewhere else.
I feel like I should ask you to repeat what you told me earlier about Catherine you met this morning for the first time and how you felt about her. So she's from TDK Venture.
Yeah.
But what you said was so interesting, and I think this is exactly what you're saying about the youth.
Yes. I mean, first of all, you have NEA to thank because I can tell you truthfully that just as an IBM, a young star, a young talent, very often will not call my attention. Just because I'm looking for the senior guys in the room, right? Because I'm, you know, that's my crowd, that's the, NEA really taught me the caliber of these young people in the venture community and how impressive they are.
It's so hard to get in.
Yes, it's hard to get in. Their, you know, credential is amazing, but I had amazing credential people, but I don't think I gave them the chance to shine. So when I'm sitting at a table having breakfast and I'm talking to, you know, my traditional buddies, right? Head of CSAA Venture. She was the head of HP Venture. Yeah, Deborah King. So I'm talking to my buddies, and there's young people sitting on the other side of the table. At one point in time, one of them,
Catherine,
said, I'm sorry, can I interrupt? She said, is it possible for us to have one conversation that we can introduce one another and get to meet one another? And I just looked at her and I thought, wow, that is impressive. You know, first of all, it's uncomfortable to interrupt when people are having conversation. She obviously felt she has a very valuable thing to propose, right? And most of the time, though, young women, particularly of Asian, tend to be the ones that wants to follow whoever wants to lead. So I was very impressed. So I remember saying to her, well, I said, that's a fantastic idea. Why don't you start? And I told her I'm still the founding chairwoman, so I know everybody here, but I like to meet you just as much. Corporate venture in general, and I think that's why NEA is so successful. You allow these people that has the talent and the initiative to take charge of their own destiny rather than hand-holding them. Or I was telling you, I used to have this honeymoon period with people that work for me.
Oh, you have to explain that.
So, rather than teaching them the rope, let them really, figure out, because we live in such a different world. The model is changing, the engagement model is changing all the time. I think they bringing the most current, new perspective that has a much higher chance to succeed. Can you imagine sitting around, a boardroom, talking about TikTok, which is actually one of the NEA company because we're actually investor of the parent company. And then you have people like me and Forrest Basket. It's like,
never used.
I have never done TikTok, right? So recognizing the talents that you have and the incredible power of their perspective and their decision-making process, I think is the very key to a corporate, not just corporate venture, to be honest, corporate venture to try to teach the corporation as a whole.
But you keep talking about passion being so important. You can't expect passion if you don't give ownership. It's as simple as that.
Right. But you can't get anything going if you don't have that passion.
Yep.
If you can't even convince me of what you're doing, you can get to the next step, whether it's my investment, my relationship, or just my interest to take another meeting. And believe it or not, I believe passion, first of all, it has to be real. You and I can recognize a used car salesman. Exactly, right? So people that know this thing, know it, see through it very quickly. So if you're trying to do something with me, and even you don't believe it, why should I believe it? And that is really why I think it's such an important component. The conviction, really, because that word, I will say, became a lot more ingrained in me after I started working with the venture community. It's sort of a level of conviction the entrepreneur has. Whether you think this is a stupid idea or the brilliant idea, but that level is an important component of whether this become a successful idea or not.
Absolutely. Actually, the way we enable contrarian view at TDK Ventures is I only have 3 criteria. To be passionate, well-researched, which means networked and due diligence, and convinced. And if you have the 3, I have no veto rights. You can go ahead with the investment proposal. And that, I think, is what you're saying. The passion, the conviction. Of course, well-researched is doing the work.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the research, you have to do your homework, right? I used to tell people as a corporate venture leader, the things that will just completely burn you out is you come to me and you don't even do the homework about my company, for my IBM company.
Oh,
right?
That's so bad.
We're a public company. Everything we do is in proxy. My CEO is talking about what 10 years from now look like.
Just read the annual report.
Right? It's out there. I mean, one thing about public companies, we have nowhere to hide. And you don't even bother to look at publicly available information. And that is that is probably the worst thing the entrepreneur can do. Come to me and say, well, are you guys in gaming? Well, guess what? We're not in anything as far as you're concerned, because I'm not doing anything with you.
So that's a golden nugget to the entrepreneur right here.
Exactly. It really is. I'll tell you the best entrepreneur, and I said that when I speak to entrepreneur all the time, not only do the homework, they adopt the language.
And they connect the dots, they use a language that
Yep.
works.
My CEO, you know how CEO goes, right? In front of the analyst, or CNBC or whatever, always give the notion of where the future of the company. The best entrepreneur incorporate that language into the pitch deck that I get to see as a corporate investor. This is how we can help you in this grand vision that your CEO is talking out there to the investment community. Oh my God, I'm like copy paste. That's all I do. I copy paste.
But it showed you have done the homework. And I'm just realizing we receive a lot of pitch about energy transformation.
Right.
Our CEO, who's now the chairman,
Yeah.
talk about energy transformation as a EX.
Yeah.
I haven't seen a single pitch that leverages
See?
simple copy and paste.
Imagine the first
Yeah.
entrepreneur that come to you.
Yeah, it would be
And
like, I need to read
His
the rest.
pitch is tailored to that vision, right? Boy, your job to advocate for him is just became cut and paste. It's just that easy.
It improves the odds.
These are the best of the best. I'll tell you. I've seen a few of them. Unfortunately, it's not all the time, but it really shows the caliber of the entrepreneur when they do that level of research. Of
Before
course,
the first meeting.
yes,
Yeah.
yes, because it is hard to get to people like us, right? Especially you and I. I mean, I usually, by the time I get to meet the CEO, I'm really there to convince you to take my money because all the homework is already done on you, right? So I'm the one selling you, not you really don't need to sell. Some entrepreneurs don't really know that a lot of the time. They're trying to show you how great they are, what a fantastic company they're building and all that. Boy, the corporate venture, is a engine that can truly help entrepreneurs grow their business, and more importantly, to scale the level of impact that whatever business they're building can have, right? So I maybe I'm biased because I'm from the corporate venture community. I think is more powerful than not the actual capital injection aspect of
Absolutely.
it, right? Because you can't replicate those capabilities
The
easily.
superpowers.
Right.
Actually, let me ask if you have the same view as I have. I think the financial VCs, if we are thinking about the value they bring, they're about from here to there. And the corporate VCs could actually be very negative, but if they're done well, could be even better than the very best financial VCs.
Yes. So that's why, good entrepreneur. I mean, sometimes you're not ready. And to be honest, a lot of very early experimentation does not really have the position to attract a corporate investor yet, right? But if you start the relationship early, where there is a conversation that can be monitored through the life cycle, then your chances of being relevant to your strategic investor and vice versa. So it is a much longer game. It requires much deeper relationship very often. And you're not just putting the capital and running away, right? You got to figure out now, in my opinion, the difficult conversation of actually make it real, whatever the synergy, whatever the strategic alignment you have defined, now you have to go execute that part of it.
Deliver.
Yes, that is not easy to take for any corporation because, the mothership is a moving target all the time. People have next quarter revenue to pay attention.
So you nearly spend 60 minutes to say how complex it is.
It is
Why
complex.
would anyone do it?
Because it's like you said, you're a kid in the candy store. There's no job better than yours where every day is a new, exciting, potential
Every day
outcome.
you learn something new.
Yes, and there's new cast of people, good, bad, and ugly, but by and large, super smart, right? And people with passion and conviction on what they do. I just can't, I mean, like I said, this can be a horrible job for people that require the structure of methodology and play.
Yep.
But for people who feel so excited about innovations and people trying to do different things, and especially in the world that we live right now, the impact of private sector companies, entrepreneur, in my opinion, is much, much more relevant to the world and the society as a whole.
Absolutely.
And having these quality entrepreneurs succeed because the qualities that we see in them, I'm sure it translates to the values that they hold as well. In my view, it just, I mean, when so many of the large institutions are, should we say, changing at the very least, I actually think, there is a much more higher level responsibility that investors take in recognizing we're not having another, fiasco of just greedy cases of entrepreneurship, people that just in it for themselves and want, because it is so destructive.
It is.
And it is really the
It's a minority, actually. The majority of entrepreneurs want to do good.
Yeah, but one of those cases carries so much damage, right? I mean, I don't want to mention any name here, but we all know the names, right? We all know the case.
I think I know which one.
It's very important for us to. I mean, when we start talking about the stakeholder capitalism and all these ESG related topic, I'm sure you're very, very intimately familiar with that, with the energy and all that related topics.
Sustainability development goals.
Right. But the truth of the factor is, that is all very, very close to us as individuals, as parents, right? Wanting the world to be a better place for our children. So I mean, not to get too touchy-feely, but I do think, just like CEO has a much bigger job than shareholder value. I think the investors have the same kind of a shared responsibility to really make sure that when we're funding a company, when we're supporting an entrepreneur, we're seeing the level of impact he or she can make on a broader sense, rather than just giving us the right X in the return.
Very nice. Claudia, in the last 2 minutes of our interview, could you please share your optimist view for the ecosystem? How do we, together as an ecosystem, get even better at serving entrepreneurs? Downturn is going to be painful, Nicolas, as you and I both know. The optimistic view of it is that it will also remove a lot of noise that we unfortunately have in the last couple of years. Just like you said, is panic mode. Digitalization as a 5-year plan suddenly became a 2-month execution plan. So people were scrambling to figure out. I think the entrepreneurship will continue to be a vital part of the society. And the optimistic view is we're now going to have a much more filter system to nurture the ones that needs a lot of nurturing, rather than dealing with all the noises that was injected throughout the pandemic cycle. So for the right entrepreneur building the solutions that really matter, I choose to believe that they will continue to get the level of support from the ecosystems that you and I represent. Claudia, thank you so much for all your insights.
This is fun, yes.
Thank you so much.
No, thank you, Nicolas.